Today, let's dive once again into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. According to the storyline timeline, this is the fourth film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which is Iron Man 2. Released in 2010, the events of Iron Man 2 take place in the same year as The Incredible Hulk and the first Thor, but a bit earlier than theirs. Rumor has it that Iron Man is on the brink of death this time around. What's going on? Let's find out. It turns out that the arc reactor in Tony's chest, which keeps the fragments of shrapnel from entering his heart, runs primarily on palladium. This causes a high level of palladium in Tony's bloodstream. When the concentration of palladium in his blood reaches 100%, Tony will die, faced with the reality of his impending death. Even the once cheerful Tony can't help but feel a bit melancholic. In one of his final moments, Tony sits atop a giant donut, enjoying the sweetness that fate has seemingly offered him. Though his heart remains untouched by it, Tony realizes his life is burning out like a candle in the wind, and he decides to complete all his plans before he reaches the end. Life must leave no regrets. In the nighttime city sky, Iron Man leaps out of a plane, clad in his Mark IV armor, streaking through the bustling night like a meteor. He lands directly in the center of a stage. In that instant, all eyes are on him, and the crowd erupts in cheers. Tony, in his most flamboyant display ever, demonstrated the transformation process of the Mark IV armor and declared that as long as Iron Man exists, the world will never lose hope for peace. To achieve this goal, Tony even announces that he will host a year-long technology expo in search of his successor, while the crowd celebrates his courage and brilliance. No one notices that in the corner of the stage, Tony stares down at the device in his hand, a troubled look on his face. As his AI assistant Jarvis had warned, frequent use of the armor is rapidly worsening his condition, but Tony must still don the Mark IV suit, as the military has already set its sights on him. Ever since Tony revealed his identity on television, the military has been trying to take his technology in the name of serving the people. They've even brought in Tony's competitors to try and tarnish the image of his armor during a hearing, but Tony knows their true intentions. If he hands over the suit, it will end up in the hands of terrorists. Therefore, in the courtroom, Tony's words were so strong that he even hacked into the projection system to show everyone the progress of other countries' mecha development.
Yeah, I'd say most countries 5-10 years away. Hammer Industries 20.
I'd like to point out that that test pilot survived.
I think we're done is the point that he's making. I don't think there's any reason.
The point is, you're welcome, I guess. Because I'm your nuclear deterrent. It's working. We're safe. America is secure. You want my property? You can't have it. But I did you a big favor. I have successfully privatized world peace.
Tony's sharp and powerful words left the senators utterly humiliated. After dealing with the military's issues, Tony returned to his lab and quickly downed a large glass of chlorophyll to slow the spread of the toxin, but the test results were not promising overnight. Tony's poisoning had worsened by 5%, and the toxin was beginning to ravage his body. This only strengthened Tony's resolve to move forward with his plan to create a better future for the ones he loves. His solution was to hand over Stark Industries to Pepper, officially appointing her as the new CEO. Pepper, however, didn't think much of it. She saw the appointment as a sign of Tony's trust and confidence in her. In the afternoon, Pepper invited Natalie, who was a secretary, to handle the transfer of the company. When Tony faced the alluring Natalie, he once again felt a surge of emotion, prompting him to secretly look into her background. This action made Pepper a little jealous. However, Tony's condition continued to deteriorate, leading him to contemplate more reckless actions. He decided to participate in a high-profile car race. With intense enthusiasm, Tony replaced the driver who had been prepared for the race, though he felt a little nervous when he first hit the track. The moment the car roared to life, all his emotions were drowned out by the engine's thunder, and all he could see was his competition. Yet, unbeknownst to him, a crisis was quietly unfolding off the track. A worker suddenly entered the track and ran toward the speeding cars. He ripped open his shirt, revealing an arc reactor just like Tony's, and flung out electric whips powered by the reactor, igniting his shirt and exposing a mechanical exoskeleton underneath. Whiplash's target was Tony, and with a single lash of his whip, he sliced the valuable race car in half. Tony's car flipped wildly through the air. Fortunately, the car's advanced safety features saved Tony's life. Seeing Tony in danger, Pepper and Happy rushed to the racetrack with the Mark V suit. However, Tony's situation was worse than they had imagined. Whiplash approached Tony's wrecked car and, with one swing, split the cockpit in two. Luckily, Tony had already escaped to the back. He fought back, but his attacks had no effect on Whiplash, and he was quickly beaten into a sorry state. As Whiplash closed in, the air on the racetrack became thick with the scent of death. Thinking on his feet, Tony leaped away at the exact moment Whiplash swung his whip. The whip rebounded onto a fuel tank, triggering a massive explosion. Tony had a brief moment to catch his breath, leaning against an iron fence, but there was no escape. Thankfully, Pepper and Happy arrived just in time, slamming into Whiplash with their car at full speed. They thought the crisis was over, but to their surprise, Whiplash showed incredible resilience, withstanding multiple hits from the Rolls-Royce. Whiplash sliced the Rolls-Royce in half. Pepper quickly threw the briefcase, and the Mark V suit activated. However, Tony's actions were interrupted by Whiplash's whip, severely damaging the armor on his left arm, leaving Tony to rely solely on his right hand for attacks. But the two repulsor blasts Tony fired were effortlessly deflected by Whiplash, and instead, Tony found himself entangled by the electrified whips. Tony crashed hard onto the ground, being ruthlessly tossed around like a toy by Whiplash. The Mark V armor was critically damaged, with sparks flying in all directions. Facing such a dire situation, Tony swiftly changed tactics. He decided to abandon long-range attacks and allow the whips to wrap around his arm and body, taking the risk of destroying his suit. Tony closed in on Whiplash, landing two heavy hooks followed by a shoulder throw, finally subduing him. Tony quickly tore the arc reactor from Whiplash's chest, bringing the crisis to a temporary end. However, Tony was filled with confusion toward this crazed enemy in front of him. He couldn't understand why this man had attacked him in a public setting. Moreover, this reactor was the culmination of his father's life's work. His father had once declared that no one could replicate it within 20 years. So how had Whiplash obtained this technology? With these questions in mind, Tony went to the interrogation room to visit Whiplash. It turned out that Whiplash had a tragic background. His real name was Ivan Vanko, and his father Anton had once been one of the founders of Stark Industries. Anton had been one of the key figures behind the reactor's development, but in the end, he was exiled for a crime he didn't commit. After returning to Russia, the father and son were banished to Siberia by the Russian government, and their lives fell into dire straits. Up until Anton's dying breath, Ivan and his father were convinced that everything had been part of Howard's scheme to take full control of Stark Industries. Ivan's assassination attempt was aimed at exposing the true face of Tony and his family, and to destroy the heroic image of Iron Man in the public's mind.
Family of thieves and butchers. And now, like all guilty men.
Before leaving, Tony gave Ivan a suggestion. If he doubled the improvement on the core coil and added a plasma thruster, he might actually achieve his goal. Tony had thought this sarcastic remark would leave Ivan to spend the rest of his life in regret. Little did he know, he had planted a massive ticking time bomb. Soon after, Ivan was sent to prison. However, in prison, Ivan noticed that the guard delivering his meal had a deeper meaning behind his gaze. He immediately sensed that something was off. Underneath a water cup, he found a hidden note. And when he picked up the steamed bun, he found a C4 bomb inside. All of this made him realize that someone was trying to help him escape. Not long after, the guard brought Ivan a cellmate. From their appearance to their prison number, they were nearly identical. It was obvious that this was a decoy arranged for him. Ivan swiftly and efficiently disposed of the man, then placed the explosives on the wall and took the guard's key. Just like that, he walked out of the prison openly. Under the strict protection of two guards, Ivan was gently escorted into a pickup truck and taken to meet a mysterious figure. The mysterious figure turned out to be none other than Justin, the competitor Tony had humiliated during the Senate hearing. It turned out that Justin had been searching for armor technology to surpass Tony's. When he saw the footage of Ivan's assassination attempt on Tony, Justin also noticed the reactor in Tony's chest. He proposed a partnership with Ivan to create an armor that could outmatch Iron Man. As the saying goes, "The enemy of my enemy is my friend." Ivan agreed. Ivan then easily hacked into the control systems of Justin's company's armor. Looking at Justin's firewall code, Ivan couldn't help but sneer. Ivan climbed a ladder and yanked off the head of the armor. After examining it closely, a revenge plan had already formed in his mind. he decided to use his armor technology as the foundation for his revenge. Meanwhile, Justin was already fantasizing about releasing a suit that would surpass Iron Man, envisioning himself becoming a top-tier billionaire.
I want to make Iron Man look like an antique. I want to know what I'm talking about.
I can do that,
Yeah?
no problem.
But Tony had no idea about any of this. He was buried in his lab, immersed in a sea of data on Ivan. He finally realized that everything Ivan had said in prison was true. Upon learning the truth, Tony's emotions were a tumultuous mix, surging like stormy waves. At that moment, Rhodey brought Tony heartbreaking news. Because of the incident at the racetrack, the military had found an excuse to forcibly confiscate Tony's Iron Man armor. Just as Ivan had said, people no longer trusted the safety of Iron Man. The double blow, combined with the palladium poisoning, left Tony too weak to even stand. The toxin had already spread to Tony's neck, and his time was running out. He had to carry out his final plan. Rather than let the military seize his armor after his death, Tony would rather entrust it to his trusted friend. However, Rhodey's stubborn nature meant he would never accept such a gift easily. Tony had to wait for an opportunity, one where Rhodey would put on the armor voluntarily. That opportunity presented itself at Tony's birthday party. Knowing his end was near, Tony decided to abandon his usual low-key style and throw an extravagant birthday bash at his house. His wild and exaggerated behavior made Rhodey furious. Rhodey, who had been fighting with the military on Tony's behalf, was even more enraged when he saw Tony's reckless actions.
You know, the question I get asked most often is, Tony, how do you go to the bathroom in the suit? Just like that.
However, Tony's performance wasn't over yet. Fueled by alcohol, he randomly fired his repulsor beam into the crowd. He was treating the very suit that had protected so many as a plaything, completely disregarding the danger it posed. At that moment, he no longer appeared to be a hero, but merely a drunken man clad in armor. Rhodey couldn't stand it any longer. He thought to himself, asterisk, if you don't want to protect the country, then let me do it, asterisk.
Get out.
The two fought from the ballroom to the training grounds, from hand-to-hand combat to using all kinds of equipment, from aerial maneuvers to repulsor blast showdowns. This was Tony's final plan. He wanted to teach Rhodey how to operate the Mark II suit.
Shot. Put it down! Put it down! You take a shot? Take it!
After a violent explosion, Tony was too exhausted to get up. Rhodey gave him a disappointed look before strutting off in the Mark II suit. But Rhodey seems to have forgotten that he can't control the Mark II without Tony's permission. Watching Rhodey walk away, Tony's goal had been accomplished, but this final battle also accelerated the spread of the palladium in Tony's body. Tony knew his time was running out, and he chose to accept his fate. Calmly awaiting the end, Tony sat atop a giant donut, savoring his favorite food. As for S.H.I.E.L.D.'s recruitment offer, Tony showed little interest, as though he was on the verge of death. However, Fury handed Tony a box, saying it was from Howard and that what was inside could save his life. Tony is bewildered by this sudden fatherly love. In Tony's memory, his father had always been a cold and calculating man, never offering praise or affection, yet the contents of this box made Tony reassess his father. He opened it to find Howard's old belongings, including a blueprint for the arc reactor, an old newspaper, and 2 stacks of videotapes. The tapes captured Howard's vision for a future city. At first, Tony didn't think much of these items, but when his name was mentioned on the tape, he began to reflect on his relationship with his father.
I built this for you. And someday you'll realize that it represents a whole lot more than just people's inventions. It represents my life's work. This is the key to the future. I'm limited by the technology of my time, but one day you'll figure this out. And when you do, you will change the world. What is and always will be my greatest creation is you.
In his final moments, Tony found peace with his father. He let go of his resentment and reawakened the familial bond in his heart. Tony decides to save his last moments for the woman he loves most, so he drives to Pepper's office. However, Because of Tony's previous reckless behavior, Pepper decided to give him the cold shoulder as punishment, and she left under the pretense of going on a business trip. Feeling dejected, Tony planned to go home and wait for fate to take its course, but he happened to spot a model of the future city. The model was something Howard had created for Tony. It reminded Tony of something unknown, yet he couldn't quite put his finger on it. He decided to take the model home to study it further. With Jarvis's help, Tony scanned the model and projected it into the air. By clearing away distractions like roads and trees and focusing on the central structure as the framework, with the surrounding buildings as protons and neutrons, Tony realized it was a perfect spherical structure. This structure reminded Tony of a new element, one that might replace the palladium he needed, which means he doesn't have to die. At that moment, the love of a father, transcending half a century, finally struck Tony's heart. However, Jarvis reminded him that this new element couldn't be synthesized artificially, but Tony refused to give up. His father hadn't been able to complete it because he was limited by the technology of his time. Now, Tony would finish what his father could not. Tony picked up a sledgehammer and a power drill, tearing up the floor to lay down circuitry. He completed a job that would normally require an entire construction crew. All by himself, Coulson was originally tasked by S.H.I.E.L.D. to keep an eye on Tony, but he had to leave to attend to an emergency in Mexico, so he came to say goodbye. When Tony saw that Coulson had found Captain America's shield.
You know what this is?
Bring this to me. Exactly what I need to make this work. Lift the coil. Drop it. Drop it. Perfectly level.
He finally completed the last piece of his project. In his backyard, Tony built a high-energy particle accelerator. Carefully, he placed the prism inside the machine and activated it at maximum power. After adjusting the angle and direction of the prism with precision, a stream of blue high-energy particles shot out like an arrow. The powerful energy surged through every corner of Tony's home. Whether it was the unbreakable steel-reinforced concrete walls or sturdy rail tracks, they were all effortlessly sliced through by this force. By the time the dust settled, half of Tony's house had collapsed. But the high-energy particle stream had hit the target dead on. As the brilliant blue light flickered, a new element was born. Eagerly, Tony extracted the new element and inserted it into the new core. It would take one more day of rigorous testing before it could fully replace the old core, but time was running out. With Ivan's assistance, Justin had completed the deployment of an armored drone army for land, sea, and air, and upgraded the Mark II suit into War Machine. At this moment, Justin was riding high, arrogantly declaring at the Stark Industries Expo that Tony's technology would soon be tossed into the trash heap of history. However, fate had its own plans. Ivan installed a program in all the war machines, and with a single command, he could instantly turn the entire expo into a wasteland. He had also taken Tony's advice and upgraded his electric whips. With everything ready, Ivan sent Tony a message, announcing his revenge and threatening to destroy the 40-year legacy of the Stark family within 40 minutes. Hearing this, Tony knew that if Ivan succeeded, it would be a desecration of his father's dream, something far more unbearable than death. Without hesitation, Tony ignored whether the new core had finished its tests and immediately inserted it into his chest. The blue glow in Tony's chest began to intensify, and the traces of palladium poisoning gradually faded under the power of this new element. The successful activation of the new core gave Tony a surge of confidence. He quickly suited up in the Mark VI and raced to the expo. After explaining the crisis to his friend Rhodey, all the war machines at the expo locked onto Iron Man as their target. All of this was part of Ivan's scheme from the shadows. To protect the civilians on the scene, Tony had no choice but to take to the sky, with War Machine and the Air Force's armored units following closely behind. Using the superior maneuverability of the Mark VI, Tony skillfully dodged the enemy's attacks. Not only did he come out unscathed, but he also pulled off a sharp turn in the battlefield, taking out the enemy without firing a single shot. With the war machines in the air neutralized, the land and sea war machines, controlled by Ivan, stormed out of the expo, launching indiscriminate attacks across the grounds. The sound of explosions filled the air, plunging the entire scene into chaos. One drone locked onto a young boy dressed as Iron Man. Fearlessly, the boy raised his toy weapon, ready to fight back. In that critical moment, Tony arrived just in time. His heroic figure planted the seed of courage in the young boy's heart, but War Machine was still hot on his heels. Tony couldn't fully retaliate, as he was concerned about Rhodey's safety. At this rate, the expo was going to turn into a living hell. At the key moment, Natalie sprang into action. She quickly teamed up with Happy, rushing toward Ivan's hideout. In the car, Natalie swiftly donned her combat gear. With her unique agility and outstanding martial arts skills, she defeated the guards head-on. Thanks to Happy's assistance, they easily dealt with all the security personnel. However, when they entered the control room, they found that the cunning Ivan had already fled. Despite this, Natalie successfully rebooted War Machine's system. At that moment, Tony temporarily broke free from Ivan's control, but his troubles were far from over. The remaining countless War Machines surrounded him and Rhodey. The battle resumed as Mark 6 and War Machine fought side by side, trusting each other and watching each other's backs amidst the relentless drone assault. However, the sheer number of drones seemed endless. Tony decided it was time to use his ultimate move. For a brief moment, the entire battlefield fell silent. Though the move was incredibly impressive, Tony could only use it once, and the danger was far from over. Ivan descended from the sky, returning for revenge in a specially upgraded suit. Ivan had taken Tony's earlier advice and enhanced his weapons. His electric whips crackled menacingly. Rhodey was ready too. But their attacks had no effect on Ivan's armor. Instead, Ivan's electric whips struck first, slicing off War Machine's Gatling gun and knocking Iron Man to the ground. Ivan withstood War Machine's barrage of fire, using his whips to ensnare Tony and Rhodey's necks, steadily draining the power from their suits. If this continued, both Tony and Rhodey were going to die. In this moment of despair, Tony suddenly communicated an idea to Rhodey, who immediately understood. As the dust settled, Ivan was barely clinging to life. However, in his final moments, he delivered a parting gift to Tony. Suddenly, alarms on all the drones started flashing. He had triggered their self-destruct systems. However, the low-level explosions posed no real threat to Tony. Ivan's true target was Pepper, far on the other side of the expo. His goal was to make Tony live the rest of his life in endless regret. Tony immediately realized this and swiftly activated the Mark 6 suit, pushing it to full power as he flew straight toward the other end of the expo. Just before the drones could self-destruct, he managed to grab Pepper and soar into the sky. In the brilliant flashes of light, Tony had saved Pepper, and in doing so, saved their love. However, having just survived a near-death experience, Pepper was overwhelmed. She was just a regular woman, longing for simple happiness and a peaceful life with Tony by her side. Seeing that Pepper couldn't calm down, Tony chose to comfort her with a kiss. That kiss solidified their relationship, moving it from ambiguous to clear. Later, Director Fury of S.H.I.E.L.D. approached Tony, inviting him to serve as an advisor to the Avengers. Tony took the opportunity to make a request of his own. He wanted the government to publicly recognize his heroism. In the end, the senator who had been at odds with Tony multiple times was forced to present the award, serving as the backdrop for Tony and Rhodey's moment of glory. It was the ultimate blow to the senator's pride. And with that, the movie drew to a close. According to the final scene, the story of Thor is about to unfold. But before that, let's first enjoy the tale of the Incredible Hulk. Stay tuned for more exciting content next time. We'll see you soon.